Now, as we here at France 24 continue, we report, we hope anyway, freely and fairly, of course, on the war in Ukraine. It's far from the case in Russia. But what do Russians really know about what's going on? Well, state control of the media is almost complete. But does that mean that ordinary people are fully buying into the government's narrative? Well, we're going to discuss that in Global Grid, and our chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons, is joining me here on set to talk about it. So, Rob, what do Russians actually really know about what's going on?
Well, you would think, Stuart, wouldn't you, given the deluge of information that we're getting about the war in Ukraine, that in Russia, which is directly affected by the war, they would know at least as much. Surely they know, for instance, that at least according to the Ukrainian figures, 23,000 Russian soldiers have died, that 10 generals have been killed, that their flagship battleship in the Black Sea, the Moskva, has been sunk, that there are stories of horrific atrocities committed in towns like Bucha, Irpin, and so on. And yet the impression is that that sort of information isn't, by and large, filtering through. And the prime reason for that is that Russia, or the Russian state, controls television almost totally now, if not totally. And television is the medium through which most people in Russia get their news. You know, it wasn't that long ago. You look back to the wars in Chechnya, where there was massive amounts of information coming through, and through television. You could switch on your television, you could see Russian troops being attacked in Chechnya. That is all over. The control over the media is absolutely total, and there is no bad news allowed to filter through. So the question then, to address your question, is, do they get anything at all? The answer has to be yes, because apart from television, they get children are watching social media. Social media being cracked down as well in Russia. But, you know, young Russians are as smart as young people anywhere. They can use VPNs to get onto sites all over the world. Surely they're telling their parents what they're finding out there. Many people in Russia have relatives in Ukraine. Many people have friends in Ukraine. They talk to them on the telephone. So you have to assume that the information is there. But on the surface, at least, it appears as if there is a vacuum of news.
Rob, you talked about the tight control. Just how tight is that control then?
The control, you know, is almost total now. If we're talking about in a legal sense, what you can get access to legally in Russia. It's always, or at least over the last couple of decades, it's always been tight and has been becoming progressively more so. You remember we've spoken on this program in the past about, you know, the foreign agent label used against Russian media outlets to make life difficult for them, to make it to try and avoid having that label of foreign agent attached to them. But since the start of the war, things have become increasingly more difficult. Numerous outlets, some of the more famous independent outlets, like Echo Moskva radio station, Novaya Gazeta, one of the most famous newspapers in Russia, Dozh TV or Rain TV, all of them closed down. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Loads of others have as well. Lots of foreign media outlets have been closed down. BBC Russian, for instance, RFI, Deutsche Welle, you know, the list really goes on and on and on. It is very, very difficult to get access to unbiased, objective information in Russia at the moment.
And that tight control, Rob, does it translate into support for the war? I mean, is the Kremlin's messaging, if you like, actually working?
You know, it is really difficult to answer that question, Stuart. But on the surface, one has to say that, yes, it does appear to be working. Recent opinion polls in Russia suggest that over 80% of the population support the war aims of the Russian government. Of course, it's true that opinion polls conducted in a society as authoritarian as that of Russia aren't entirely reliable, to say the least. And on the other hand, it's true that although Vladimir Putin remains popular, his popularity is not really deep. You know, it's the popularity of a man who controls the narrative. But there's no real warmth in relationship between Vladimir Putin and the Russian people. And as information does start to seep through, and as life in Russia becomes tougher, as it will do, as the long-term effects of sanctions start to bite, and as information about the war starts to enter into Russian society, as it inevitably must, because if Russians continue to lose troops at the rate that they are losing them in Ukraine, 23,000 according to Ukrainian sources, may be exaggerated, but there's no doubt that thousands have died. That message, the information, inevitably seeps into society. Mothers start to ask the questions. Why are their children being killed in Ukraine? Why are their children coming back wounded, maimed from Ukraine? And they talk to their friends, and gradually it spreads through society. During the war between Russia, the Soviet Union, Afghanistan, the role of mothers was critical in changing attitudes inside the Soviet Union to that war. And during the Chechen wars in Russia as well, the mothers of the soldiers played a critical part in changing society's attitudes to the war. There is a likelihood that the same sort of process will begin to happen in Russia now with the Ukrainian war, as the information seeps in. But for the moment, Vladimir Putin continues to control the narrative.
See what happens over the next coming days and coming weeks. Thanks very much, Rob. Rob Parsons, our Chief Foreign Editor here on France 24.